Hey everyone, this is Founders365 with me, Stephen Haggerty. On today's show, we have Iain Haywood. I was going to say Hallwood then, and that would have been
That's all right.
embarrassing. He is founder of the competition agency and new owner of SimpleShop. How are you, Iain?
I'm very well, Stephen. Thanks for having me on.
Good. No, thanks for being on. So, first question, as always, and we're going to get much more into this because for those of you who don't know Iain, he wears four hats. But what is your main focus at the moment, and how did you get started in it?
So my background has always been in building products, and I sort of started in about 2008, 2009, and as a younger man with all sorts of ideas and limitless time, it felt like I wanted to kind of try a lot of different things, and I really tried everything you could imagine as far as online businesses were concerned. So I built dating sites, apps, games, any new thing I thought, oh, that's popped up and I want to have a go at that. I did, and I sort of very aggressively experimented. And the vast majority of those were abject failures, which were completely fine. And again, because the sort of resources deployed weren't so much that I'd lose a kidney or a house or something.
Yeah.
That was totally fine thing to do. And slowly but surely you realize, you think you know stuff, but obviously 3/5 of nothing. But it's a lot of fun trying to find out, and with every one of those was a lesson. And slowly but surely I started to get more of an idea simply about business. The building the stuff is kind of easy, but the business of the thing is much harder. And I started to either acquire or build businesses that had a business case and made money. And then sort of around 2014 or so, a couple of those had acquisitions, which were nice, not kind of not buy a yacht kind of acquisitions, but nice, nice to have kind of acquisitions.
Maybe a small fishing boat.
Yeah, small boat, absolutely. And a little bit before that, because one of those businesses that did get sold was to do with competitions and prize draws and incentives. It was a sort of article sharing community for competitions and prize draws, which was gamified. Because I was sort of in that space, it made a lot of sense, and we were interacting with a lot of promoters. It made sense to make a sort of an agency out of the marketing functions related to the marketing and operations of running a promotion, a prize promotion. And so in about 2010, the competition agency started, and that's been going ever since, and that's been growing year on year, and started extremely humbly, but now is quite sizable. So that remains a large part of what I do and what my team does. And SimpleShop is a very recent addition to the stable. So for a lot of time, I was focused more on the agency, and that was client services. That wasn't really building so much of our own stuff. And what we did build were tools for our own agency. So we built kind of draw tools and randomization tools and these sorts of things, which kind of scratched that itch, but they weren't their own products that we would sell or otherwise monetize. They always kind of fed back into the agency. So I sort of had a few abortive starts at building something new from scratch. And I kind of went back to what I used to do, which was finding a kernel of an idea that someone else has had, or a business that was sort of a bit skeletal and wasn't in growth mode, or the founder had run out of energy or money or inclination.
Common story.
And take that on and see what I could do and use what I've learned to bring it to shining glory. And SimpleShop is an example of that. And SimpleShop is an e-commerce. Well, the really boring name is e-commerce platform services provider, but most people know e-commerce website builder, e-commerce platform, a kind of Shopify type business. And so that was acquired in August of last year, and since then we've been working as fast as we can, really, to kind of bring that up to what we would consider a competitive standard in 2020.
Yeah. Fantastic. Loads of information you give me there, which is great. What I'm always interested in, especially from people like you, is how do you find those sort of businesses that the founders are tired, they need the help, where you can come in, purchase them, and then make them shine in the light that you can see them in?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's one very, very useful resource which used to be called SitePoint Marketplace back in the day, and they rebranded to Flipper, which
Okay,
some of
yeah,
your
yeah.
listeners might be familiar with.
I've sold a few domains on there.
We've all been, we've all had our time on Flipper, and Flipper is a little bit like TK Maxx in as much as you can go there 100 times, and 99 times it'll just be fluff and rubbish, and you've got to do the digging. But then one time out of 100, you will find potentially something that is really interesting, and often it'll be missing a key ingredient or two. That very often that's marketing. To be honest with
Yeah.
you, there might be a solid idea. It's been somebody's side project, a kind of side hustle, and the idea is fundamentally good, but they never got traction, or they ran out of money, or they got bored. So some of my most successful businesses started as an idea that someone had on Flipper, and SimpleShop was also bought from Flipper as well.
Oh wow.
It was slightly different in as much as again, you can always have an idea in your mind of what you might snag a bargain or something. SimpleShop had a lot of people interested in it because it is a very, very large sort of package of technology. It's not lightweight at all. There's a huge amount of
Yeah.
operational code in there.
It's not like a shop that sells custom socks.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of meat in there, and there were a lot of interested parties, and it was quite a protracted bidding war. And you do get to the sort of buffer zone of thinking, oh my god, am I really going to pay all this money and then spend the money, renovating
Yeah.
it? But I think it was sort of a right place, right time sort of thing, and I had been itching to get back into a product that was really, really challenging, and I don't think I could have picked one that's more challenging than this, to be honest. So that's how I found it. I would always recommend Flipper, even if you don't find something that you want to buy necessarily, or even if you're listing things and they don't necessarily sell. There's a lot of kind of waiting in places like that. It is always a good place to find inspiration, and even if you're starting something from scratch, you can look at something and you think that's a good idea, and you can look at what the cost of reproduction of that business might be, and you think, okay, well, that's $20,000, but I could build it for 10 and it'd be more modern. That's sort of validated in a
Yeah.
sense whether that idea is worth building.
Do you often find ideas on there perhaps slightly overvalued?
Yes, absolutely. And that's why there are a lot of kind of long-term listings that are just
Still there.
it's just still there. And I've been in that situation, but then I've sold businesses for relatively large amounts on Flipper, and I've been surprised because it has just happened at that particular time to.
Yeah.
I can remember I was into kind of blogs and editorial quite a bit back in the day, and I listed something for sale which was growing. The main thing is, if your Flipper listing is growing, that's the best thing you can have. If you have revenue and you're growing, that's fantastic, because the vast majority of businesses aren't on Flipper.
Yeah.
So you stand out a country mile if you have growth. This thing had growth, and we happen to share the same, coincidentally, advertising network partner. And that particular buyer had a stable of large editorial staple, and they just snapped it right up in about an hour, and I couldn't believe it for a full asking price. So it can happen, but it can be a bit of a graveyard, but always a useful place to look at.
Yeah, it's interesting. What made for you when you're on Flipper? What made SimpleShop attractive?
I think the brand name is excellent. It's such a wonderful brand name.
Simple.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Ron Seal name, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can be in any doubt what it is. It's an aged domain, so if you're familiar with kind of buying and selling domains, the backlink profile is often a useful thing, but also the age of the domain does have significance for SEO. And this was registered first in 1996, so that's a really, really old domain. The backlink profile was terrible, absolutely terrible. So we're doing a lot of work with SEO to kind of bring that up. But it was a great brand name, and it was something that was built. Obviously, the business has flaws and things that need to change, but I do want to sort of pay tribute to the person who actually founded it, a chap called Mark Garbers, who did build a tool that was sort of quite lovingly created, and there's a lot of quite mindful, deliberate decisions about how the platform was built and orientated to make it the easiest and most pleasant experience possible. So I could see that right off the bat, and that kind of there was some personality to the business that radiated. It wasn't simply a kind of how can we build this as cheaply as we can, and how can we just kind of jump through whatever hoops are necessary. Notwithstanding, obviously, the things that needed to change, there was goodwill with the business, and also it did have a user base, small though it was, and it's grown since then. But it had a user base, a great brand name, super domain name, and it was built with love, not to be too soft about it.
Yeah, so it was checking all your boxes, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, it ended up, as I say, there ended up being quite a few interested parties. So the idea that when I saw that business and I thought, wow, I could snap that up for X.
Yeah.
That wasn't the end result. I did end up buying it, but it wasn't a bargain as such.
It was really taken away from your yacht fund.
Yes, absolutely. The small boat fund was fully depleted after that.
God, I hate when that happens.
I know, me too.
What's your process for when you buy you get the email, say you've won, or you're now the new owner of SimpleShop. What's your process after that? So it's almost like the equivalent of your first day in a new office, right?
Yes. So when I bought SimpleShop, that was a private sale by that point, because it had sort of escalated beyond the realms of Flipper, because there were other sort of institutional parties interested. So that was kind of done offline, if you like. So we had a transition period where we had an agreement set out to say by this date we would expect these assets, and there would be a kind of period where the previous owner would be on hand to help with migration and help with the million or so questions that we will have. And that you hope to sort of taper down naturally, but there is a sort of an end stop date. So we're not totally ragging on, the old owner to say, what's this, why not? And obviously in emergencies we would. But first day is kind of, is your first opportunity to look under the hood of the car, basically. So again, you can ask for as many things as you can during the purchase process and the kind of prospecting process, but you never really know what you bought until that first day. So full audit of everything started on day one, and working out how these things fit together. Again, because it's an entirely proprietary build and a serious mass of operational stuff, and just starting to comb through it and figuring out why things work the way they do, what dependencies there are when we migrate to new servers and stuff, what is going to break, basically. And initially we kept it on the old server, so there was 100% continuity, and it literally took us about 5 or 6 months to spec out and properly be happy about migrating to new server and new server infrastructure. And even then, that was not a sort of straightforward thing. So I've still got flashbacks to that. And you will always have to rebuild a bunch of things you didn't think you'd need to. So day one is figuring out what that looks like, really, and then sort of coming up with a plan to by X date, do we want to be so far ahead? And again, in your mind, you do have grand visions of, right, well, these are the easy fixes and I can fix this tomorrow. And all the kind of tedious, boring, glass eating tasks take precedence, and actually the fun stuff, or the so-called fun stuff, you don't get to until 6 months down the road. So we're doing some fun stuff, but it's 95% glass eating and 5% fun right now.
You can still see the fun stuff in the horizon.
I can, you have to keep the fun stuff in the horizon, otherwise it's just you've got to keep yourself, you've got to have a carrot dangling.
Otherwise it ends up back on Flipper.
Oh my God, that would be bad.
Can you imagine?
But, I could. No, I'm way too far gone now.
You're too far into it now.
It's death or glory now.
Do you run them as a completely separate entity, or do you bring in the team from the completion agency to help you?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we do share resources when it makes sense to do so. What you don't want to do is you don't want to see the bright shiny new thing and then divert resource that should be making you money onto the kind of magpie. Oh, look at this is new. And with myself or with anyone, it's human nature. New thing syndrome exists, particularly in kind of tech and startups. That's why everyone has 10 side projects, is because there's a new thing, and you think there's an evolutionary I think they call it the Coolidge effect or something like that. That like
Okay.
novelty gives you dopamine, like a new thing.
Yeah,
You need
I get
that
that.
hit. So you have to kind of be a bit disciplined about it. And obviously, because the burn rate with a project like this is extremely high, if your burn rate is high and then you're diverting resource that is making you money, that's generating income, that can be quite a dangerous thing. So the answer is sort of yes and no. We do have obviously dev resource that is moonlighting on SimpleShop, and there is a huge amount of technical requirement there. So we've had to kind of expand a bit. But yes, where we can double up, we have.
Yeah, fun. Did it come with a team, or was it just?
No, it didn't. So that's another useful thing to think about when you're looking at buying businesses. Obviously, there might be technical debt, there might be debt as far as personnel is concerned, and if you are dependent on X agency to fulfill this function or these services to fulfill these functions, these days it's a lot more services than people. There's a stack of software as a service that does the job that certain devs used to be able to do, or certain accountants or whatever. So no, we didn't have to inherit any people, but because our goals for the business are very different to the previous owners, that kind of that was kind of not gunning for growth in the same way that we are. We have to expand that commensurate with what we want.
Exactly. How do you you sound very similar to me, actually, and especially when you were mentioning about the side projects and like shiny object syndrome and the dopamine, the nice positive hits it gives you.
Yeah.
How do you handle wearing the four? Because you're wearing four hats effectively. We've only really touched upon two of them, but how do you handle that?
Well, sort of as best as you can, really. It's you have to be aware of the fact that you are compromised sometimes, and the sort of business with the most infrastructure is the agency. It's the longest standing, and so if you can delegate, you will delegate. If you can sort of palm things off and have sort of separately managed centers of activity, then that's good. And there are certain things that I'm very good at, and there are certain things that I'm not very good at. So for agency, I'm very good at speccing out projects and liaising as far as sales is concerned, or client onboarding. But as far as execution, that can be done by someone else. So the minute that I can get that off my desk and be confident that it will be executed properly, it leaves. In terms of my kind of face time with businesses, the other two hats require a lot more face time and a lot more a presence in those businesses than SimpleShop and competition agency. So you can sort of virtualize. I mean, SimpleShop particularly, because it is a software as a service. It doesn't, other than customer support, it doesn't require any human facing, because we don't do any sales or anything like that. It's purely a pipeline in, and then a subscription. The only customer facing people are CS. And again, you can outsource that. An agency, again, is sort of easier to virtualize. But the other two businesses, which I suppose we will sort of come into, which I should be absolutely clear, I did not found either of these other two businesses. They definitely require a lot more face time and a lot more of me being around, basically.
Yeah, so let's talk about the other two, your other two hats.
So again, with a huge disclaimer that I was not part of founding team of either of these, and these are businesses that were established before I came on board. But I spend a lot of time helping two businesses that have sort of shared management, but they're very, very different. One is a financial technology company, and the other one is an e-commerce company. And the e-commerce company, funnily enough, went through a very, very long period of replatforming just before I bought SimpleShop. So this was sort of in my mind already, that the replatforming process, it can be extremely torturous. It can be extremely lucrative if you're an agency trying to do that for a client, moving from one platform to another, for example, from Magento to Shopify, which are two big platforms, or from a completely custom site onto Shopify and try and layer that on top, which is very doable, but takes a long time, depending on how complex those platforms are. So that was kind of, there was a strange segue there into SimpleShop. But the e-commerce one first is a company called Arena Flowers, and Arena Flowers is a business that is 11 years old and is the UK's #1 ethical florist. That's not just a thing that you say, is an accredited thing. So on the Ethical Company Index, we have been #1 for I think 5 or 6 years now in a row.
How do they accredit that?
So there's a lot of qualifiers, and as you might expect, and a lot of that is to do with what power sources you use, how much single-use material you use, like single-use plastic, your fair trade credentials as far as supply chain is concerned, workplace policies, these sorts of things, and all that kind of stuff. So a part of my work with Arena Flowers is to reinforce that, and I brought on board a tree planting initiative where for every bouquet you buy, we plant a tree. But for some of those sorts of things, we plant 10 trees or more. So it's not, there's a scale. It's not just a sort of single tree. But you can imagine we're responsible for quite a large volume of trees planted now, which is very nice. And outside of my responsibility completely, our management and every one of the business is extremely invested in the most fair trade routes that we can possibly engineer. And you can imagine that floristry as an industry, working through parts of Africa and all sorts of places, it's much like a lot of things like the coffee industry or the cocoa industry. It's not always had the best reputation as far as supply chain is concerned and ethics. So at tremendous effort, probably the most effort of anything we do, that's a really kind of core value, and that comes across very much nowadays in the branding. So last year there was a big rebrand and replatform, this thing that took a long time for us to do, and again that was this from one platform to another, and now sort of the branding and the everything that you see about the business reflects that. Whereas before we remained the UK's #1 ethical florist, but people sort of didn't really see that at a glance. You'd kind of think, oh, the products are nice and it's priced appropriately, and the service is good, but where's the ethical bit coming in? So that does a very large volume as far as B2C is concerned, so the consumer brand, but of a much bigger volume is the B2B fulfillment operation, where Arena fulfills huge, I mean, like you wouldn't believe the volumes for we're talking millions of bouquets. For other flower companies, for supermarkets, charities, media, so white labeled, if you like, flower stores, but also established brands as well that we happen to, and specialist florists that we handle. So it's a bit of an iceberg. The kind of top bit you see is the B2C, but underneath is the B2B, and it's absolutely enormous. I'm not at all really tasked with the B2B stuff. That's very much operational, but as far as kind of marketing and direction for Arena Flowers, I help out. Again, I don't like, I mean, I'm part of a team here, so I don't want to suggest that I'm any more senior than I am. And then
everyone.
No, definitely not. And the other business is Smart. Smart is one of the UK's largest fintech companies or groups now, and it has a couple of products underneath, one of which is Smart Pension, which is one of the UK's leading workplace pensions, if you're familiar with auto enrollment and enrolling your employees in a workplace pension scheme. So that was founded in 2014. And a friend of mine is the co-founder of both of those businesses, Arena Flowers and Smart Pension, and a chap called Will Wynn, who was ex eBay, and it's a great name. It's a great name, and nominative determinism at work, because he does win a lot at things. And when he was at eBay, he was quite a fascinating character. When eBay UK, so eBay UK obviously was a quite big thing back in the day. It still is, I'm sure. And then when there was an exit, there was a bit of an eBay UK mafia created, a bit like the PayPal mafia when PayPal exited. There was quite a lot of capital created there in people having options, and that resulted in lots of people out of eBay UK creating very big businesses. So Will went off to found Arena Flowers. Another eBay chap called Tom Valentine, who has also been involved in both those businesses, he went to found Secret Escapes, if you're familiar with Secret Escapes. So there are a lot of businesses like that were created out of eBay. And Will, he's quite a fascinating character. He managed to raise over £100 million by creating eBay for charity. If you've ever seen that on the listing, where you can opt to contribute to a nominated charity in your listing, that was his idea. And they said to him, "Yeah, okay, like we're not really convinced. Do it outside of work hours." And he did it, and obviously the resultant contributions to charity have been in the hundreds of millions, which is such a crazy thing. So he founded Arena Flowers, and then years later he noticed that auto enrollment, being a kind of a government thing that you have to do as an employer with qualifying employees, was kind of underserved by the default, which is called Nest. Nest is was supposed to be the kind of option of last resort. It was supposed to be a bit of a kind of backstop, and they were expecting the market to perform better than it did in terms of private solutions. But a lot of those private solutions didn't really cut the mustard. So there was an opportunity for Smart Pension to go in there, and we are now. We are right up there. I mean, Nest obviously is larger than us, but as far as the private providers are concerned, we're right up there. And this transformed into a fintech sort of, it's a bit of a hydra with lots of different parts, but there's our workplace products, but a lot of other financial technology products that either we develop ourselves around retirement and pensions and savings, or we power other businesses' technology and product offerings for their own savings or pensions or other types of financial products. So we build the tech behind that. So if you're a big bank or you're a government, can we build this quicker than you? Yes, definitely. And obviously we've got lots of examples of doing that. But so we have a lot of institutional partners in different countries, a lot of big banks. We're for each round that we've raised, we have a kind of a big bank in that territory. So our first one was Legal & General Investment Management. They led our Series A. And then our Series B was led by JP Morgan in the US. Obviously that was our US play. And then in Australia, our Series C was led by Link Group. Link Group are one of the largest players in superannuation, which is what they would call workplace pensions. So for all of these places, we have a lot of institutional muscle, and for those sorts of institutions or governments, or a player who wants to be a first mover in a government, in a territory that wants to move into workplace pensions, which is the way the world is going, we power that, either through governance or through technology. So it's a really mixed thing, but it's an order of magnitude. It's an order of magnitude bigger than anything I've ever dealt with before. Again, big disclaimer: I'm not even approaching founder. I'm just a guy that got brought on. But originally, I was sitting with Will, and he was explaining to me the idea for this business, and he was very excited about it. And he really thought that he'd hit on something himself. And his founder, Andrew Evans, had sort of come up with this and thought, we're going to make a play for this. It's pretty bold and need a lot of money, but we're going to do it. And I thought, this is interesting. I've just sold a business. Maybe I can put my small boat fund towards this at kind of pre-seed stage. But because my small boat fund was so small, I mean, we're talking dinghy, there was a kind of tiny window where I would have been relevant as an investor, because I would have just been a complete peon any other time. And because the sale process is protracted, and it's not like you get the money the day you sell or whatever. By the time that had all gone through, and I thought, if there's ever another round for friends and family, or that early stage, I'd love to be involved. But by that time, they were already at seed, and the kind of scales were well beyond my means. And so later on, I was invited on, and they said, well, we'd like to get you involved in any case. Come and contribute for, and actually work on the project rather than investing in it. So that's the story behind that.
I was going to say you missed the boat, but it wouldn't have
been. Yeah, well,
boat.
I should have thought of that. Yeah. Yes, but I caught another one.
Exactly.
A ferry.
When you're looking at getting involved with businesses and projects, how do you evaluate what's the best use of your time and the energy that you're going to put into it?
Yeah, again, not an easy thing to have in the top of your mind, and a lot of it is simply trying your best, and then your experience will very rapidly tell you what you should and shouldn't be doing. And it is always difficult because with those businesses, I do have, I might have options, for example. So I am invested in the performance of those businesses. But in terms of my time and the use of my time, again, if there's something that could be delegated that is execution that could be done by someone else, obviously you would look to do that. And again, trying to compromise as little as you can between wearing those hats, and obviously those two other businesses also being growing businesses, and naturally, if they could have 110% of my time, they would. And they would want to. Why wouldn't they? So there is always that that sort of delicate balance that you need, but there's not really any rule that tells you how you should go about it. I think just striving for efficiency, if you can, is all you can really do. And I don't get it right all the time. I definitely don't. I'm still, I've been doing it for quite a few years now. I joined both of those companies in early 2016, and I definitely don't feel like I've got it nailed by any means. It's just that you just have to keep trucking and
I don't think you ever do though, do you? I don't think you'll ever get to that. No one ever gets to that point where they go,
no,
nailed.
But I think if you're aware of it, that's a pretty good start.
That's it. Then you can adapt and change and tweak and do all the fun stuff. So back to SimpleShop. What are you doing? What's your plans with it? Where do you want that to go?
So like a lot of people will say, of course, we have grand plans for it, and we want to hit excellent.
We want to be the next Uber.
No, mercifully not. I mean, being the next Shopify would be great, but I think that's a sort of a little bit of a simplistic way of kind of looking at it. What we're looking to do is a little bit like I would say to any business that I was working with, or indeed any of the shops that have shops with SimpleShop. Any of our store owners, often I'll get an email saying, I want to, I have this idea and I'm making this product. How do I make this business successful? And to the best of my ability, usually what I would say is you need to validate three things. You need to validate the product, the pricing, and who you're marketing it to. Validate three things and master one marketing channel. If you can validate what you're offering and master to whatever extent one channel, that's the makings of a relatively successful business. So what we're trying to do is make sure that those three things, our product, our pricing, and who we're marketing to, are fully validated, which I believe they are, and then mastering one channel. That's our kind of our near-term goal. But in order to validate the hardest thing to validate is the product, because the pricing is pretty much sorted in the market. You can tweak those things quite easily. There's huge amounts of development resource and rebuild and renovation that has been going on since August and will be going on probably until we sell. So it's just trying to keep that front and center and always be innovating, because obviously our competitors, Shopify and lots of other large, long-established incumbents, have huge development resources at their disposal and huge war chests. I mean, Shopify is a listed company, and I can't think of what their capitalization is, but it's something like
a lot of testing resources if they want to.
Huge, absolutely huge. So obviously we are absolute minnow. I'm not pretending that we're bigger than we are, but it's about being as efficient as we can with those resources, and where the biggest wins are, we take them. And again, that's mainly been building our core engine and rebuilding our core engine, rebuilding our templating engine, and then the kind of fun stuff that people see more so, again, a bit like an iceberg, that those engines are under the sea. And then the thing that people see are the integrations with plugins and services, and then the new themes and templates they see and the different ways that they work. So that's the kind of fun stuff that people can feel like they can measure progress by, but actually the progress is measured in miles underneath in all the technical debt that we're removing and the the innovation that's going on behind the scenes.
Exactly.
So that's the first focus. In terms of number of stores, we have obviously grown since we bought, which is great, and we've more than doubled the number of stores, which is great.
Wow. Nice one.
But because that is from a relatively modest amount, it's easy for us to say double. So it's very easy. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we're in the hundreds, which is great. I don't mind sharing those sorts of numbers, but it only really becomes a very meaningful platform once you're in the thousands or the tens of thousands, I think. So once we've ticked a few more boxes as far as the proposition being improved even further, and we're kind of our new themes and templates again, which is sort of the thing that people will superficially judge the product by. And when you get onboarded, the first thing you want to do is pick a theme. That's what I do. And make it pretty. Once that refreshes in, which will be this week, in fact, that's when we can turn the acquisition taps back on. Because though there have been a lot of front end changes and a lot of changes to how the site works, and it's greatly improved, it's not that quantum leap from what it was before. At least to the naked eye.
Yeah.
So we want to use that marketing spend as much as possible, because again, a Shopify, they can afford to spend hundreds of dollars on a customer acquisition, because even if it's a minimum tier and the customer lifetime is a year, that's that's $260-270, and indeed they will be hoping that customer will progress. Obviously not all of them do, but they will progress to future tiers, and obviously once they're in the system. With us at £9 a month, we can gun for volume, and we can gun for volume at a loss, and we have done. But the unit economics of that acquisition are slightly different. So we want to make sure that whatever we can do to improve conversion rate and to improve people sticking around, we have to do that first before we commit more money.
Yeah. Did you find any drop-offs when you purchased the business from perhaps some loyal customers?
No, we didn't. Again, because there hasn't really been any
Big
noticeable. Yeah, so I mean, what we would certainly hope would be the case is that people have only seen improvements rather than diminution in the offering or what's available. So everything has been value add so far. So there was a bit of kind of an organic bump after that, because we communicated to some of our users to say, listen, if you fancy recommending this, these new things are here. And because a lot of our users are, as I say, small businesses, or they might have an online a sort of counterpart to an offline shop, they sell offline, or they're kind of hobbyists, word of mouth is quite strong for SimpleShop. So that's a real advantage that we have got at this early stage, is that we've got very strong word of mouth, and there's goodwill, because it's a very personal kind of, we're at that scale where we can be very personal. Everyone talks to the founder, i.e. me, or the owner, every day. It's not, not through layers and layers of account management or kind of customer service people and getting bounced. So that counts for a lot at the moment. And obviously, in terms of hand rearing, at these early stages of these platform businesses, you just have to be as attentive as you possibly can. So that is an advantage that we do have. And obviously Shopify, they can't do that. But the way that you sort of transition out of that when you do start scaling your acquisition is a really tricky thing. So that's something I'm very mindful of when we do hit certain stage. And it's very common for SaaS businesses, is kind of, to what extent do you step back from that, and how accessible do you let yourself be, particularly when your average customer is paying £9 a month? How available can you be?
And also, what you don't want to have is that whole, I remember when I could speak to Iain. And how times have changed. SimpleShop, it is about managing and pre-framing a lot of that customer support. So I think nowadays people expect a much faster communication with support. They expect to go on a website and you've got a live chat, or you can have a request a callback with it, like Apple does, request a callback within 2 minutes, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there is very, very high expectation on CS, and I can say at our current, CS operationally is very taxing apart. So operations and development, they're the most expensive in terms of time and money things for a business like this. And right now, because we're at this scale, it's easy to scale up a bit, or it's easy to meet demand. But obviously the growing pains come when, you have to get that volume. And I can think of a lot of businesses that I work with where those growing pains have been almost the making or breaking of that business, scaling up, particularly customer support and things like that for operationally intensive businesses, or particularly regulated businesses. It's really hard, and it's a real. I don't think the requirement is quite the same for us, because so much stuff can be self-service. So for example, we can have our live chat auto suggest an article that will give an instant answer. If it's a kind of just switch this on, that's much cheaper for us to tell someone you just need to switch this on than to liaise with a human. So we're not regulated in that sense. So that's something at least. But the same rules will apply. It's going to, we need to be prepared for a bit of turbulence when we grow.
Like with anything. Very quickly, because I know we're getting short on time, but are you going to go through funding rounds?
That's a good question. I think we're at the position at the moment where we could do either. So in my experience, in other ones I've done, I've either been pushing for volume or I've been pushing for profit. Obviously, if you're pushing for volume, your cost per acquisition might be more than you may recoup. If you're pushing for volume, that's a big justification for going for funding, because in my very, very limited experience, I don't take a lot of external funding, again, because a lot of these businesses are kind of circular and they can recycle working capital. If ever I were, I'd have to be in a growth position. Again, like almost anything, flipper, funding, whatever it is, growth solves basically all of your problems. If you're running out of money, or the house is on fire, if you're still growing, that's all people really want to see. If they see a consistent growth rate, or indeed an exponential growth rate, then that's a huge thing. So if we were in funding position, we'd have to make sure that we were gunning for growth at all costs. But at the moment, we have good enough runway that we can jump through a lot of these hoops to, as I say, bring SimpleShop up to the absolute apex of what it should be as a product offering, which is always going to be simpler than Shopify, but still sophisticated enough. 99.9% of e-commerce platform DNA is the same. As long as you can do that, and you can do it to the expected standard, which obviously it already does, then that's kind of enough. And then you kind of orientate it slightly around, could we make this quicker to sign up? Could we make this easier to list products? What time could we shave off? We've got money in the bank for that. We've got money in the bank to press on at a reasonable pace. But if we wanted to turbo, that would be the moment, the funding.
Add some jet fuel.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So it's a possibility, but we're not, as I say, we're not deliberately gunning for growth at any cost at the moment. But we certainly could turn that on, and that would be the thing I think that would qualify us really. I think the product is solid enough on its own, but but they need to see.
I see a lot of people thinking they should go for investment when actually their business is quite self-sufficient on that growth phase on its own, without having the need to have any external investment. It's almost become like a trend, hasn't it?
If you can, that's great. I mean, experiencing as I have much larger businesses that require funding in the tens or hundreds of millions in some cases,
just to keep the lights.
It's a full-time job for multiple people, usually founders or founding members. They will be doing that the whole time. That's their role in the business. Obviously, you are at a certain stage where the headcount is massive. Obviously, you're not a bit like me doing a bit of everything. But that's a full-time job chasing funding, and it's tough going. I mean, Smart Pension has secured really good institutional partners and excellent funding. We've fundraised very healthy amounts at up rounds at every time. But if you are a small business that could validate your idea, for example, or get to a sort of MVP, or test whether you have product market fit without funding, there's no reason not to do it. And actually, if you are going on the funding treadmill and you don't evidence the fact that you have sought to test your product market fit with your own money, or with some money that isn't institutional, that's a bit of a red flag for investors as well, because you think, well, how much do you really want this to be a reality? Could you not have, flogged, some stuff, or could you not have taken a small loan, or could you not have raised what they would call a triple F round, which is friends, family, and fools round, and got 10 grand or something, or 15 or 20 just to build a prototype? If you can't demonstrate that without an institutional bit of money, then what you're doing. You need to to find other ways to do that.
It's I feel like we could have another whole conversation just about investment and funding and all that kind of stuff.
Well, my own sort of experiences and observations are generally not as someone who raises fundraising, but is around a lot of people that do. So I don't feel like I'm really an expert in that.
It's a good place to be, though. You get to be in that clear position.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So obviously the good news is that one thing I would say about funding, and I've naturally sort of tended away from it because I'm spinning lots of different plates, and I need to be relatively flexible. And obviously you're extremely accountable to other parties the minute you raise funding, which, as it should be, that is both an advantage and a disadvantage. So I could say that I'm actually not I'm beholden to myself only, and obviously to our user base, who we certainly don't want to disappoint. But if you're not accountable to investors, there isn't the same fire under your feet.
Yeah.
But obviously, if you are using your own money, then your burn rate is the thing you wake up thinking about and go to bed thinking about as well. But with institutional investors, they do expect a different scale, speed and different growth and all these sorts of things. So if you do need that to kind of, as I say, have the fire under your feet, then investors are good for that. And perhaps that's a weakness of mine, that I'm too comfortable doing my own thing, and perhaps I do need a bit of a change of scene and a bit of a shock to the system.
Sounds like you're putting yourself through enough already. So,
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
it's don't spin another plate. Don't put that pressure on you. You're doing good.
Right.
I ask all my guests this at the end, but if there's any founders listening that perhaps I think could be really good, looking at buying a small business or going through that change, what are three bits of advice you can give them just to finish this off?
That's a good question. So I think if you were prospecting for a business and you had no idea what you were looking for, obviously if the idea excites you, that's a good start, because once you buy that business, you're going to eat glass for a long time, and you need to distance yourself from the idea that you're going to buy this and that you have the secret sauce that's going to turn it around in 10 days or something like that. I mean, I'm sure there are instances like that, but they're pretty uncommon. And there will be a reason why that person is selling the business, sometimes because they haven't been able to make it work in the way that they have. So you have to be very mindful of the fact that, how much more of an expert am I than the guy who built this or the girl who built this? So a little bit of humility is also useful. And you always underestimate what that burden is. So does it excite you? Do you think you've got what it takes? Possibly more than, again, I'm not putting myself above anyone who's sold a business to me, by the way, but you get what I mean, I think.
Yeah.
And are you going to love it in a couple of years' time, knowing that it is going to be difficult, and you're taking on problems that someone else has dealt with before and has either solved or not solved. And I guess, does it this is a fourth one, I suppose, does it fit those things I was saying earlier, which is it a validated product? Is it validated pricing? Is it a validated market? And can you master one of those acquisition channels? Can you master PPC? Can you master SEO? I mean, if you can master more than one, that's amazing.
I think that's crucial, though. It's if it's valid, you've got to get that validation. Otherwise, it's a huge not waste of time, but it's a huge lesson if you don't do that.
Absolutely. And as early as you can, test. You'll find the market is a ruthless teacher, and if it's not working, then you'll know. But again, sometimes you have to kind of bring that along and think, well, if this person has tested it, what is wrong about their test, or like, what did they miss? But yes, I mean, again, I don't mean that to sound like anyone who sells a business is sort of failed or whatever. Circumstances change, or people run out of energy, or inclination, or money, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they need a change, and sometimes there's someone like me to pick it up and run with it. Until I get tired.
So I think you've got so much energy that it takes a lot for you to get tired.
We're in this one for the long haul. This is a sort of 5-10 year.
It's nice to see as well. It's really nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of. It's not a cut and sell sort of thing.
No, it's definitely. This is I think because my agency is profitable and has been for a long time, and kind of operationally runs quite neatly. I've wanted something quite big and dirty and a big problem to solve, and I'm thinking sort of, if if I could exit at 40 or 40 something, this will probably be my last big project, and then I'll just be tinkering. So I've got to do it before I get too old, otherwise I'll
go big or go home.
Exactly, it is a bit of a big or go home.
Lastly, I feel like you sent me a message saying that you have a little gift for listeners and viewers of SimpleShop.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't tend to do this too much, but we put together a promo code if any of your listeners happen to be thinking about either building an online shop, if they're kind of thinking about it and they want to give it a try. As I say, we've got a free trial, which is 14 days, and there's no credit card. You don't have to put any payment details in. If you don't like the trial, you don't have to do anything. And then if you did want to run with it and you wanted to pick a plan, it's £9 a month, cancel anytime. It really is as basic as can be. But in terms of validating an idea, that's a pretty cheap way of validating. If you're wanting to validate a product you were selling, and you wanted to go a little bit beyond word of mouth, always recommend doing word of mouth as well, your pricing and how you would market it, set up a shop. And we've got a promo code which is 365, which is the numbers 365, and that would give you 20% off for 3 months if you wanted to give it a go and be transactional.
Amazing.
And so we have a lot of on the site. We have a lot of hobbyists. We have a lot of side hustlers that it isn't necessarily their main business, but what we do have are people that have been side hustlers, and we get a lot of people like knitting organic wool jumpers, or like organic cosmetics, or a lot of like quite artfully.
They've gone on from Etsy onto you.
Yes, absolutely. So they'll progress from a marketplace often to their own store, and that's usually with growth. And we've had people that have migrated from side hustle to their full-time business, which is a really nice thing. I mean, that's a very satisfying. Get some people say,
because you can winning stories on there and things like that.
Absolutely, and you can see the volume. Obviously, we can see the volume of sales that they do, and you can plot that, and you think, oh my god, this is amazing. It's better than your own business when you're seeing those businesses that you power really gather speed. It's a really good feeling. So that's very nice. So if anyone wants to give it a try, 365 is the promo code. And as I say, it's a free trial for 14 days if you want to give it a go.
There's literally no reason not to do it.
That's couldn't have said it better myself.
Exactly. Iain, thank you so much for coming on for Founders365. This has been a really, really good conversation. And I look forward to having another conversation with you very soon.
Yes, let's catch up.
Yeah, definitely. Thank everyone for watching, listening. This has been Founders365.